Ready? You all set, Patrick? Oh, yeah. Assalamu alaikum. Inshallah, I'll be starting the program. Alhamdulillah, we are honored to have Ustaz Faizan Mumtaz with us. He's going to be giving a talk about istikhara. And the theme is living your best life. Inshallah. Please also remember tomorrow we have a couple of programs. So we have a program, actually 2-in-1. It's about Isra and Miraj, and also a night of Quran. So we connected the two together. We have Quras, some locally and some coming from outside of state. And we look forward to having you and your families, inshallah. Assalamu alaikum.
Thanks, I appreciate it. Thanks so much. I'm just going to pull this a little bit. Bismillah, alhamdulillah, wassalatu wassalamu ala rasulillahi sallallahu alayhi wasallam. I begin by praising and thanking Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and asking him to send his peace and blessings upon his final messenger, Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam. For those of you who are attending tonight's talk, inshallah, I would appreciate if you guys could come just a little bit closer, because I have a few questions I want to ask you, and it'll be easier for me to hear your responses if you're closer, inshallah. It'll make it more engaging, more interesting for you as well, bi-idhnillahi ta'ala. As our ustad, other elder, alhamdulillah, he mentioned, Brother Yusuf, he mentioned that today we're going to be talking about life's big decisions. We're going to talk about this term that you might have heard, maybe you never heard of it. It's called istikhara. And we're going to talk about what are those qualities that us as believers, young believers, old believers, men, women, anybody should have, so that we can be analytical, so that we can be practical, so that when we have to make decisions, we're not too indecisive. And what are some of the formulas or methods that we can follow, inshallah, to become stronger believers? Because life is about making decisions. Life is about taking action. You cannot sit still for your entire life. You can't be at home playing Fortnite every single day for your entire life, Minecraft or Roblox. You can't just be looking at business news or social media or watching movies your entire life. That is a life that has been wasted. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gave us this opportunity, this one and only life, to be present, to be alive. He gave by his tawfiq, we are believers, alhamdulillah. And we hope and that we pray that we die upon the highest of iman. And this life is not to be, such a precious gift. And when the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam was telling us about اغتنم خمسا قبل خمس, that take advantage of 5 before 5, he is saying that there is this treasure. There is a treasure in your youth, your free time, your wealth, your health, but your life is this treasure that if somebody is deprived of it, when somebody loses their life, they wish that they can be alive so that they can do more good deeds, or so that they could have believed. Allah tells us in the Quran something that nobody who knows math or science or anything like that, even though we like math and science, but if somebody who only believes in those things, does not believe in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, then they will not have this information that we're going to share with you today, because it comes from wahi, it comes from revelation, it comes from guidance that Allah gives us in the Quran, that He sent to the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And in the Quran, Allah tells us that there are people in their graves right now, disbelievers, who are wishing that they can be alive because now they believe. In their grave, they believe in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. That belief will not help them in the hereafter. And they wish that they can be alive so that they could have been a believer. But alhamdulillah, you're here in the masjid on a Friday night. You believe in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. You just prayed an obligatory prayer, which comes with a huge reward. And so you have something that people in their grave, millions and billions of people in their grave, they wish that they could have this gift that you and I are enjoying right now, alhamdulillah. So let's purify our intentions. Let's try to open our hearts to understanding this message, this guidance that the Prophet ﷺ gave us about making decisions. And even there are people in their graves that are believers. Allah tells us in the Quran that there are believers in their grave that they wish they can be alive so that they could have done more good deeds. And so we have this chance right now to make better decisions, to have a higher quality of life, to invest in the actions and the statements in this world so that we are pleased and by the mercy that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala descends upon us in the hereafter. And inshallah, through that mercy, we can enter into paradise, a Jannah in which there is no sadness, there's no worry, there's no anxiety. You and I know you want to have fun all the time. Jannah is the only place you can relax and have fun all the time. Allah tells us in the Quran, Inna ashab al-jannati al-yawm fi shughulin fakihun. That the people of Jannah, they only have one shughul. They only have one kam, one job that they need to do. To relax, to enjoy, to have fun. That's it. There's nothing else for them to do. And so if you want that retirement, you want that happiness, that relaxation, that joy, it's that 401j, it's in Jannah. It's not going to happen over here. This is a world of struggle and toil. And yes, we get to relax. We get to have some blessings. We get to enjoy the things that we have. But with that, there is effort that's required. And with that comes decisions that you have to make. And so first, I'm going to talk about a really important quality that all of us should be thinking about whenever we're making a decision, whenever we're taking some type of action. And then we'll talk a little bit about istikhara as well, inshallah. There's a hadith of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam that around the 9th year of Hijrah, which is known as Amul Wufud, that there's a year which is known as the year of delegation. And there are tribes from all over the Arabian Peninsula that are coming to meet the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, to give their shahada to the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Because at this point in time, he is the undisputed leader of the Arabian Peninsula. And he is, as he had said himself, أَنَا النَّبِيُّ لَا كَذِبْ أَنَا ابْنُ عَبْدِ الْمُطَّلِبِ. I am the prophet, and this is not a lie. And I am the son of Abdul Muttalib. He's the grandson of Abdul Muttalib, this man that everybody knows, the man, the myth, the legend in the Arabian Peninsula in his time. They know that this great leader, this awesome figure, this person that, oh my God, you're from his lineage, you're his grandson. And he's saying, I am the prophet and I am his grandson. I am his son. And so people from all over the Arabian Peninsula, they're coming to meet the Prophet ﷺ. They want to give their shahada. They want to accept Islam at his hands, in front of him. And amongst them, there is a tribe that's coming from the area of like Bahrain almost, very far away, to meet the Prophet ﷺ, to give them their Islam. And amongst them is, so they're coming on this long journey, and they're so excited to meet the Prophet ﷺ. And the Prophet, he told the companions that there's this tribe that's coming. He told the people in Medina that there's this like special tribe coming to meet me. So the companions, everybody's excited, like, oh, who are they? Why is the Prophet ﷺ singling them out? Let's meet them. So there's like this positive vibe and energy in Medina. People are excited. Just like if somebody here announced like this big scholar is going to come, or this group of students from a certain school or a certain place are going to come, like you would get kind of excited. You're looking forward to it. And so this tribe, they come to the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And amongst them, this tribe is known as Abdi Qais. So the tribe, they meet the Prophet ﷺ, they're excited to meet him. But amongst them is a companion who he wants to take his time. He wants to meet the Prophet ﷺ when he's very presentable. He doesn't want to just rush out to meet the Prophet ﷺ, even though he's excited. Because when you travel, even nowadays when you travel on a plane or anything like that, when you reach your destination, you're not fresh. You're like disheveled. You know, your clothes are sweaty. Things are kind of all over the place. So he said, you know what, let me just take a moment and find a place to wash myself, put on some nice clothes. Let me calm myself a little bit and go and meet the Prophet ﷺ in this state of peace and tranquility. And I want to have a good conversation with him. I don't want to forget about it. It happened so fast. I don't even know what happened. Like, let me go into this very deliberately, very intentionally. And so he goes and he meets the Prophet ﷺ. This companion, his name is Al-Ashaj. It's kind of like his nickname. And the Prophet ﷺ sees his demeanor. He's calm. He's collected. He has such good manners. And the Prophet ﷺ, he says, Inna fika khislataini yuhibbuhum Allah. you have two qualities. You have two habits or manners that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He loves these qualities. So you can imagine how happy he is because he's meeting the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Not only that, the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam is saying like something good about him. And he's saying these qualities that you have, by the way, Allah loves these qualities. And he's thinking, oh, what are these qualities? So the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam tells him, Al-hilmu wal-anatu. You are halim, meaning you are very patient. Halim means that you have sabr, but when other people, they get angry or agitated or irritated or upset about something, that person is still calm because they have a deeper level of patience. So you're very calm. You're not like frantic. You're not like all over the place. Like, oh, what's going on? Oh, this. You're like calm. You're not reacting to everything. Doesn't mean you're not thinking, but you're not like straight jumping out at everything. So he said you have this hilm. That's a good quality to have. The other one is al-anatu. Al-anatu means like at-ta'anni. You take your time. Again, you're not rushing into things. The Prophet ﷺ, he says, al-isti'jal, when you do things without thinking, unless it's like a good deed and you know you're always going to do that good deed, like that's a different situation. But generally, when you rush into something, that ajala is minash shaitan. It's from shaitan. But taking your time, being very calculated, being very precise, he says that this is 1/24 of prophethood. This is a good quality to have. So this companion, he says to the Prophet ﷺ, was I like born with these qualities? Like Allah gave me these qualities? Or did I like look into the world and I figured these qualities out and I made them a part of me? Because you can have qualities that Allah gives to you. And you know this, if you have little brothers or sisters or cousins, sometimes they're in the same household. And one of them, he's like a bulldozer. He runs through the hallway, not thinking about anything, bumping into things. And the other one is like very calm, very patient, very quiet. And you're thinking, man, these kids, they came from the same house. Like, how did that happen? They have the same environment, but they have different demeanor, different personalities, different qualities that Allah gave them. So it can happen like that. Or somebody can, through experience, through practice, through different opportunities, they can get different qualities. And so he's asking, like, which one is this? And so the Prophet said, Allah gave you these qualities. And the commentary is just because Allah gave you these qualities, it doesn't mean you have them forever. But at the same time, if you don't have these qualities, you can still acquire them by the tawfiq of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So this quality is really important when you're making decisions. And so there's more to this story and there's more that we can talk about it. But I wanted to just mention this because when it comes to decision making, you have to follow a process. And the meaning of al-anatu is that whatever you're doing, you follow the process of that. Like you guys know when you want to buy something or get something in your life, a video game or a computer or something like that, it doesn't magically happen. There's a process that you have to follow. You have to talk to your parents. You have to make it seem like it's such an important thing, or you have to do all these good things, your grades and this and that. Like there's things that you have to do in order for that to happen. Similarly, any decision you want to make, anything that you're going to do, you have to have some calculation. Like you have to take some time and think about it. Don't just do things without thinking. And that's what this quality is, al-anatu. Khalid ibn Walid, radiallahu ta'ala anhu, the companions, they would describe him, he's like the legendary warrior. He's the greatest military strategic mind. And usually when somebody's a fighter, you think that, oh, they just do things without thinking. Like somebody's so strong and so tough that, oh, they're just going to fight somebody right away. But really, a really smart warrior, a really strong warrior, they're going to think. They're going to know when to be offensive, when to be defensive. They're going to know when to act, when to retreat. It's not just, oh, yeah, like everybody get your swords and everything, let's go fight them. We're on the right side, we're Muslims. You still have to take precautions and do everything the right way. And so they would describe Khalid ibn Walid as kana fi anatil he had the patience of a cat wa wathbatul asadi, and the pounce of a lion. So if the enemies, they saw like the Muslim camp, or they saw the Muslim warriors, they would think, okay, what are they doing? They're just kind of like, they're not like acting on something, they're not doing something. And so it would look like nothing's happening maybe. But there's a lot of stuff happening behind the scenes, and he has the patience of a cat. Like you look at this cat, you feel like, oh, nothing's going to happen right now. It's just kind of in its own world. But when he acts and when he takes action, wathbatul asadi, he has the pounce of a lion. And so again, very strategic. So don't think that, oh, it's a sign of weakness to be calculated and to be analytical and to be thinking. No, this is a sign of strength. So coming to kind of our topic a little bit, there is this once in a lifetime opportunity that you have, which is your life. And you have to make so many decisions. And so the Prophet ﷺ, he gave us this framework and this guidance to make good decisions in our life. And this is something that us as believers, we have access to this Whereas disbelievers who reject wahi, who don't believe in this guidance that comes from the world of the unseen, from the one who created us, the one who knows what's going to happen to us every minute of our life, the one who knows our journey in this life and in the hereafter, and we pray for Al-Firdaus Al-A'la, the people who don't believe in this wahi, who don't believe in this revelation, they're missing out on some awesome life hacks, awesome opportunities to upgrade your life. And one of them is this istikhara. And one of the companions, Jabir radiallahu ta'ala anhu, he said, the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wasallam, kana yu'allimuna al-istikharata, he would teach us al-istikhara, just like he would teach us an ayah from the Quran. Meaning it's something that is a part of your life. If you think about how the Quran is a part of your life, it's something that you do it exactly the way that you're taught. You don't just do it the way that you want to do it. There's a way to do it. But also it's something that, you know, it's from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So you have a close connection to it. And this istikhara is something that you don't just do once in your life. It's not like Hajj. But it's something that you do when you have medium, large, or very big decisions to make. Not small decisions or insignificant decisions. But there are times in your life where you're going to have to make choices. And they're going to have a big impact in your life. And you're going to want to remember Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And this is one of the best ways to do that is by performing Salatul Istikhara, doing the dua of Istikhara. And whenever I say the word Istikhara, it's talking about praying 2 rak'ah, praying one salah, one prayer of 2 rak'ah, and then doing this dua after the prayer. And I'm going to explain that in more detail, but I just want to make sure you know what it means when I say this word Istikhara. It's a prayer and it's a dua that you do afterwards. And the word Istikhara, it comes from the word khair. And in Arabic, when there's words that start with this beginning of ist sometimes, it means that you're looking for something. You're seeking something. Like istighfar means you're asking Allah for maghfirah. You're asking Him for forgiveness. And istishara means you're asking people for mashwara and shura, for advice. And istikhara means you're looking for something that's khair. The word khair in Arabic means good, better, and best. So istikhara means you're looking for something that's good. And when you're making a decision and you're kind of conflicted between two things, should I do A or B? Should I say yes? Should I say no? And your mind is wondering, okay, what's best for me? The thing is, you don't see the unseen. You don't know the future. You don't even know what's going to happen 10 seconds from now. You don't know how Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is in charge through His knowledge and His will and His decisions, that your heart is beating, that you're able to breathe air, that there's millions and billions of things happening in the world that you're not even aware of. But whatever decision you make, you are seeking khair. You want Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to help you make the right decision so that things are better for you. Things are good for you. Things are the best situation for you. And so this is what the word istikhara means. And I say this because anytime you make dua to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, you are optimistic that whatever is going to happen is for the best. We don't have this misconception that, oh, you make dua to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and if you say it the wrong way or you do the wrong thing, some bad thing's going to happen to you. That's not how dua works. Maybe even if it didn't meet your expectations, maybe if it seemed like it was a test for you, a trial or something difficult, because you are making dua to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, it's the best thing that can happen for you. And so the companion, Jabir radiallahu ta'ala anhu, he said that the Prophet he says, إِذَا هَمَّ أَحَدُكُمْ بِالْأَمْرِ, when one of you is concerned with a matter, or you're intending to do something, like you want to make a decision, then فَلْيَرْكَعْ رَكَعَتَيْنِ مِنْ غَيْرِ الْفَرِيضَةِ, then a person should pray 2 rak'ah from not the obligatory prayers, ثُمَّ لِيَقُلْ, and then they should say this dua after the prayer, Allahumma inni astakhiruka bi'ilmika wa astaqdiruka biqudratika, and the dua continues, and we'll go over that inshallah. So this is guidance from the Prophet ﷺ. And you would feel so lucky and so blessed if you were making a decision and you could talk to somebody who had like so much knowledge on this topic. So for example, if you want to become like really good at a certain skill, or you want to buy a car, or you want a certain gadget, or you want a certain something, if you could talk to somebody who has like all this knowledge about it, somebody who's not easy to reach, but somebody who has like such information about it and can help you make the right decision, you would feel so grateful. You'd feel like, oh man, I'm so lucky that I can contact this person. Well, the first thing that we should be grateful for is that we have the ability to ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the one who controls our fate, controls everything that's happening in the world, that you get to consult, that you get to seek the goodness from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for any decision that you're making. This is a huge blessing. Like, we should feel grateful with our heart that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has opened this door and this avenue for us to be able to engage with Him and interact with Him subhanahu wa ta'ala. So let's talk about setting the stage for istikhara. So first, I want everybody close their eyes for a second. And I want to ask you guys a couple questions, but so just close your eyes for a second. And raise your hand if you have done istikhara before. So you can close your eyes if you want. You can keep them open, I guess. Okay, raise your hand if you've done istikhara more than 5 times in your life. Okay. Raise your hand if you've done istikhara more than 10 times in your life. Okay, interesting. So I'm going to talk about, you can open your eyes now and stuff. That was more for me to kind of understand like how often you engage with istikhara in terms of your everyday life. So what is istikhara again? Istikhara means that you're making a big decision in your life and you're going to pray a certain prayer and you're going to make a certain dua after that prayer to ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to help you make the best decision. So I want everybody to kind of think of a decision in their life that they had to make in the past, or you have to make it soon, or something maybe your parents had to make a decision that's like a medium or big decision in their life. And if it's not personal, I want somebody to raise their hand and share what that decision could be so that we can understand when somebody would do istikhara. So raise your hand if you have something like that. Yeah. Okay, karate class, yeah. Uh-huh. Gotcha. That's good. That's interesting. So if you're waiting for your parents to come and you're just deciding, should I keep waiting in this area? Should I pray? We wouldn't say that's a medium or big decision. And especially if it's something obligatory that you have to do, like praying and stuff like that, then we probably would not do istikhara for that. But it's definitely a good response. Like it's an interesting answer. But it's not a huge decision that's going to change your whole life or your life in a big way if you do A or B. So definitely I appreciate the response. What's a medium or big decision that somebody in your family has had to make before? Again, you don't have to say anything personal, but I want us to make sure we understand like that this is for medium and big decisions. Yes, sir. Yeah, choosing a job, right? It's going to have a huge impact on your everyday life, your income, your family's life, work-life balance. Yeah. Starting a new business. Yeah, any new venture, new idea. Maybe your friend comes up to you and says, man, we're going to start selling shoes on Instagram. It's going to be awesome. We're going to make all this money. It's going to be great. You're thinking, man, is this a good idea? Is this not a good idea? Should I think about this? Should I do this? Should I not do this? Yes. Yeah. Skip school or not? Yeah, we should not do istikhara for anything that's bad, by the way. So if somebody's like, oh, should I do this? Like, should I do this sin? Should I like, lie to my parents and skip school or something like that? Or somebody says, oh, should I like talk to this girl? Or should I do this one thing? Or should I whatever? We would not do istikhara for anything bad because you're not going to ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to make something easy for you that's haram or bad. So I definitely appreciate the response. But also if you skip school for a day, it's not going to change your entire life. It's not going to have a huge impact. It could if you had like final exams and you can't retake them. It could. But usually it would not have like that level of impact. Yes. What is it? Yeah, I don't like school either. I get that, but that's not an answer to the question. Getting married, for sure. Yeah. Getting a job, good. What if your parents come up to you and say, hey, do you want to go to this school next year or you want to go to this school? Do you think that's a medium to big decision? Like if they're like, oh, you know what? Maybe you can go to this Islamic school. Maybe you can do hifz. Maybe you can go to this other school, public school. So if they come up to you and they ask you, hey, what do you think about that? Do you think that's a big decision? Yeah, that's a huge decision. It's going to change your life. It's going to have a huge impact on your life. If they come up to you and they say, hey, do you want chocolate chip pancakes or you want blueberry pancakes? Do you think that's a big decision? No. Yeah, it's not going to matter. It's not really not going to matter which one you choose, right? So there's a difference between decisions that you make. And there's one decision that you've made in your life that is the biggest decision. It's so important and you're never going to change that answer. And that is believing in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, believing in the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, believing that there's a day of judgment, believing that Allah sent the Quran, believing in the angels, believing these things that we believe in. That's a decision that you make once and you know it. It's 100% true and you never change that answer. But then there's other big decisions that you make, that where you're going to marry, what kind of car you're going to get, what job you're going to pick. Those are pretty big decisions. Then there's some medium decisions, like, yeah, what school you're going to go to, where you're going to maybe go on vacation, or which group you're going to go with, or something like that. Those are medium decisions. And you can do istikhara for that. But then there's a bunch of small decisions which don't have a huge impact in your life, whether you want to eat spaghetti or pizza or this or that. Like that's not really something you would do istikhara for. You don't do istikhara for things that are obligatory. Should I fast in Ramadan? Should I not fast? You would not do it for that. You don't do istikhara for things that are impermissible. So I want you guys to understand that there are big decisions that you make, but you don't make them every day. Maybe you'll make them a few times a month. Maybe you'll make them few months, every few months. As you get older, you're going to make more decisions. Because right now your parents make most of the decisions for you. But soon you're going to have to start making your own decisions. And then guess what? You're going to have to make decisions for your own family. And then one day your parents are going to be so old, you're going to have to make decisions for them. And you're going to make decisions for your kids. And you're going to make decisions for other people. So you have a lot of decisions that you have to make in your life. And understanding what this is, inshallah, will be a huge blessing for you. Because most people, they don't actually learn about this until they get older and they're like looking to get married. Then they learn about istikhara. Whereas it's better to learn about what this is, because the Prophet ﷺ, he didn't just say do this for when you get married. He said do this when you have a big decision to make. إِذَا هَمَّ أَحَدُكُمْ بِالْأَمْرِ, when you have a big decision to make. So we should know what this is. Now, what is the process of doing istikhara? It's kind of a 3-step process. And this is good to know for any decision that you want to make. So it's not just about istikhara, but anytime you have to make a decision. If you saved up a bunch of money and your parents are like, yeah, you can get an Xbox or you can get a PS5. So like, which one are you going to get? Or your parents are like, oh, you have all this money, you can buy one thing, you can do one thing. And maybe to you it's a big decision because maybe you saved up, took you a long time. Now you have $500. That's a huge decision. You can do a lot with that money. You can do a lot of good, you can do a lot of bad, you can do a lot of things in the middle that are neutral. So maybe you have a big decision to make, like, what do I actually do with this? And you have an idea, oh, maybe, you know what, I'm going to put it in this one thing. Or maybe I'm going to donate it. Or maybe I'm going to buy this one thing. Or I'm going to buy this and then do this and then this. So you might have to make a decision like that. And what are the steps that you should follow so that, inshallah, you're making good decisions? There's 3 steps that I'm going to share with you. And I'm just going to kind of like summarize it because we don't have a lot of time. But if somebody has questions about this, then inshallah, we can go into detail at the end. One is that you should think about what makes the most sense to you and do your own research. So you should have some self-awareness. So suppose you have a decision to make. What are you going to do with this $500? You should first think about, okay, what are my options? Like, what are my choices? Or if somebody's like, okay, let me buy a car. You have 100 different types of cars that are there. And you think, okay, do I need 4 doors? Do I need this? Do I need electric? Do I need this? You start doing your own research, just so you have a frame of reference. So number 1 is that you should do some research on your own. You should have some like skin in the game. You should be invested in decisions in your own life. So number 1 is you should think about things. You should research things. You should try to figure out, okay, what makes sense, what doesn't make sense. Don't just listen to what your friends say. Your friends say, oh yeah, you know what, PS5 is always the best because this is blah, blah. And then the first thing you hear, you think, oh, that's the best thing. Then you talk to somebody else, they tell you something and you think, oh, maybe that's the best thing. Well, first is, why don't you do some research on your own, think about things on your own, maybe write some stuff down, make a little chart, try to figure out what makes sense. Ask your parents if you can research it online or whatever it may be, but try to do some digging yourself and find out, okay, what's the best thing for you to do in this situation? So that's like step 1. Step 2 is that you should talk to people, which is called istishara. You should talk to people who can give you good advice. That means that anytime you ask somebody for advice, they should have 2 qualities. One is that they should have knowledge about the topic. So for example, if I want to buy a car, I wouldn't go to my son who doesn't know anything about cars, except maybe from video games or something like that. I wouldn't go to him and say, hey, what do you think is like a good car? Do you think this is going to be reliable? Do you think this is a good idea? He'd say, oh, but we should buy a Tesla because this. Or, oh, but we should buy this because this. So he wants good for me, but he doesn't have knowledge about the topic. But if I go to somebody, number 1, I should see, do they have knowledge about this topic? Like if you want to figure out, oh, what kind of job should I have when I get older? Which college should I go to? What school should I go to? What decision should I make? So go to people who have knowledge about that topic. Usually they're older. Usually they're wiser. They might be in your family. They might not be in your family. They'll be somewhere in the community. Find somebody who has knowledge. But they should also want good for you. They should want something, giving you advice that's good for you. And that's why when you speak with believers, generally speaking, that they want for their brother what they want for themselves. And so they will tell you something that inshallah is good for you. And they will not try to conceal something. Because there are people out there that are not good people. And you might ask them for advice, but they don't want success for you. They don't want you to have a good life. And so it could be somebody maybe in your class, it could be somebody whatever. They might get jealous or they might be angry or they might be whatever. And they'll tell you something that's not actually good for you. And so you should say, okay, does this person have knowledge? And do they want what's good for me? Because when they have both of these qualities, now you can ask them for advice. And it might be somebody that you normally would not talk to. It might be somebody that maybe you're uncomfortable talking to, but they have knowledge about the topic and they want what's good for you. So you should have a conversation with them. So step 1 is do your own research. Step 2 is talk to people who have knowledge and they want what's good for you. So that's seeking people's advice. Do you think the Prophet ﷺ, who is the most knowledgeable, the Prophet ﷺ who has the highest place in Jannah, the Prophet ﷺ was the first person to rise on the Day of Judgment, the Prophet ﷺ was the most beloved to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, do you think he ever asked anybody else for advice? What do you guys think? Yeah, what do you think? What'd you say? Yeah. So put your thumbs up if you think, yes, he asked for advice. And put your thumbs down if you think, no, why would the Prophet, he knows everything. Why would he ask somebody else for advice? So pick one. You got a thumb, right? You were born with a thumb? Alhamdulillah. That's good. What do you guys think? Thumbs up if you think yes, thumbs down if you think no. You can put them down now. No, you can put it down. You can put it down. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He ordered the Prophet وَشَاوِرْهُمْ بِالْأَمْرِ. Seek advice from them. Talk to people. When the Prophet so many times in his life, he does not need the advice of any other person. But there is benefit in asking people for advice, and we're going to follow his example. He would ask people for advice. And even important things like when the Prophet is choosing where the believers should be in the Battle of Uhud, and he's asking the Sahaba, and the companions are split between the old companions and the younger companions. And he asked them for advice, and eventually he went with the suggestion of the younger companions. So definitely we should ask people for advice, and you're following the sunnah of the Prophet ﷺ. So that's number two. But just because somebody says something doesn't mean that they're right. So you did step one, you did your own research. You did step two, you talk to people who have knowledge, they want good for you. And then step three is that you do this prayer called istikhara. And I want all of us, especially the kids and stuff, I want us to say this word istikhara so that we know what we're talking about. So go ahead and say this word out loud. Istikhara. Okay? And what does it mean? It's a prayer and a dua that you do to ask Allah to help you make the right decision. Everybody good with that? So now when I say the word istikhara, it's not like I'm saying some word you don't know. Istikhara means that it's a dua that you make after prayer to ask Allah to help you make the right choice. To help whatever decision you're making, make it the best decision. So that's when you do istikhara. And the scholars, they say that when somebody does istikhara, it should not be from their fard prayer. You should not do it right after your fard prayer. It should be after 2 rak'ah that you're praying, separate from your fard prayer. Some scholars, they say that you can combine it with your sunnah prayer, like the 2 sunnah before fajr or the 2 sunnah after maghrib. And some scholars, they mention that it's better to do it as a nafil prayer, as a separate prayer altogether, because you're asking Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to be generous. You're asking Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to bless you and to give you blessings and bounties and gifts. Then you should try to be generous and try to pray an extra prayer. Not from your sunnah, but from a nafil prayer. And you can do this in tahajjud, you can do it during the day, you can do it anytime that you're allowed to pray, you can do this. So you would make wudu. If you already have wudu, then you would pray 2 rak'ah, and you can recite anything in that prayer, any surah. It's not a specific surah or anything like that. And after you finish those 2 rak'ah, then you would say a specific dua. And I'm going to say the dua right now for all of us. And then inshallah, we're also going to look at the meaning of it as well. And it's really helpful if you guys have the dua like on your iPad or your phone, or you print it out or you write it down, because inshallah, you're going to be doing this a lot whenever you're making big decisions. You're not going to do it every day, but from time to time, you're going to have to make a decision, and you're going to tell yourself, oh, you know what, I should do istikhara. And I remember once that I was looking at like buying a car, like I think maybe this is 2012, like a long time ago. And it was like my first car that I'm buying. I'd recently gotten married. I'm trying to figure out, like I had bought cars in the past, but they were like the only car I had available, the only car that I could afford. But now I had like different options. And so I was thinking, what do I do? And I remember that I went through this process. I did my research. I talked to people who have knowledge and can advise me. And then I was at the dealership, and I wasn't going to buy the car that day. So I didn't pray istikhara yet, but I was looking at different things. And then there was like a really, really good deal. And that happens many times at the dealership, but it was like the last day of the month. And they were saying, you know, if you do this, the deal will be even better than I thought it was going to be. And so I was thinking to myself, you know what, let me do istikhara right now. So I remember I went, they have like areas where you can pray. It's not made for prayer, but like kids' room and other stuff. I remember in the Honda dealership, I went and I prayed. I made wudu. I prayed 2 rak'ah. And then I said this dua after, so that whatever decision I'm making, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala puts blessings in it. And the dua is, Allahumma inni astakhiruka bi'ilmika. Oh Allah, I ask you for the good by virtue of your knowledge. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He knows everything and we do not know. So you're asking Allah, you're saying, oh Allah, please help me. I seek your counsel through your knowledge. Wa astaqdiruka biqudratika. And I seek the help of your power, your might, your omnipotence. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He can do anything. He knows everything and He can do anything. So you're asking somebody who has all the information and has all the power to help you in anything that you want. وَأَسْأَلُكَ مِنْ فَضْلِكَ الْعَظِيمِ. And I ask you from your great bounty, your great blessings. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He is Al-Kareem. He's so generous. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He gives and 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 He gives, and we can't even track all the things that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has already given us to this point. So we're saying, oh Allah, from all of your fadl, all of these great blessings that you can give, oh Allah, I'm asking you to give me some from that. فَإِنَّكَ تَقْدِرُ وَلَا أَقْدِرُ. Oh Allah, you can make things happen and I cannot make things happen. So you're admitting to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that we're all weak human beings. We don't have the ability to influence anything or to do anything or to choose anything. We cannot make anything happen. But we're saying, Ya Allah, you can make anything happen. I cannot make anything happen. وَتَعْلَمُ وَلَا أَعْلَمُ. And you know and I don't know. Even if you think you know something, you know that you really don't even know. You really don't have any understanding of it. But Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He knows. وَأَنْتَ عَلَّامُ الْغُيُوبِ. And you are the ultimate knower of all the things that are unseen. Sometimes you see something, you hear something, and you think, okay, this is the right thing to do. But you don't know the consequences of that action. You don't know the world of the unseen. But Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He knows all of that. Then you say, Allahumma in kunta ta'alam. Oh Allah, if in your knowledge, this matter, this decision, anna hadha al-amr, this thing that you want to do, and you can say the thing that you're trying to do. If this job that I'm going to take, or this thing that I'm going to buy, or this decision I'm going to make, or saying yes to this. So you can say that, or you can think it if you don't want to say it. خَيْرٌ لِي فِي دِينِ وَمَعَاشِي is good for my deen and my ma'ash. It's good for my religion, my religious life. It's good for my Islam, because that's the most important thing to us. Even if somebody comes up to you and says, okay, you know what, here's $1 million, you can do whatever you want. If that's bad for you as a Muslim, that's a bad thing for you. Even though it looks good, it looks like, oh, this is awesome, you can have whatever you want, you can do whatever you want. But if that person will end up going far away from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala because of something that seems like a good thing, then that's actually a terrible thing. It's a horrible thing for them. They ruin their life by being far away from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So you're asking Allah, oh Allah, if this decision that I'm making is good for my deen and my everyday life, my ma'ash, wa aqibati amri, and my hereafter, when all the matters are going to be concluded, if this is a good thing for me, faqdurhu li, then please will for this to happen. Please decide for this to happen. وَيَسِّرْهُ لِي, and make it easy for me. Make it something that I can attain and I can achieve easily. ثُمَّ بَارِكْ لِي فِيهِ, and then bless me in this decision. So you're asking Allah, Allah, if this is good, then please, Ya Allah, please help this to happen. And please make it the best thing. But also there's the other side of this dua as well. And this is the part that you really have to focus on, because sometimes you think something is good for you, and when you're young, you don't know that certain decisions, they seem good for the first few minutes, but then you regret it for a long time. Or they seem like it's good, but actually your parents are telling you, you know what, it's actually not a good idea to do this. And you don't know because you don't have that experience. And when you get older, you would say the same thing to your kid, but because you don't know, you're just like, oh man, they don't know, but I know. But you're asking Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that if this thing, وَإِن كُنْتَ تَعْلَمْ أَنَّ هَذَا الْأَمْرِ, if this decision is شَرٌ لِي, is bad for me, is evil for me, fi dini, in my religion, wa ma'ashi, and my everyday life, wa aqibati amri, and my hereafter, then fasrifhu anni, then take this thing and put it really far away from me. Don't even make this an option for me anymore. Because sometimes something seems like a good idea, and when you don't take that decision and it's still there, you still think, oh man, maybe I should do that. Maybe it's, but you want Allah to take it really far away from you if it's bad for you. If it's bad for your deen, your dunya, your hereafter, oh Allah, please make this thing so far away from me. And wasrifni anhu, and make me far away from this thing. Make me not want this thing. Make it dislike to me. Make it something that it's not appealing to me. I'm not interested in it, and make it far away from me. I remember once there was a younger child, and his parents were putting him in like full-time Quran memorization hifz program. And in the beginning, he was like, man, I really don't want to do this. Every day after school, he used to go play basketball with his friends. And in the winter, he used to play something else. So he was like, man, every day I have like this hour and a half, 2 hours where I get to do this thing. And his parents, they liked that. They liked that he was playing basketball. He was doing these things. So he's talking to other kids. He's like getting physical. It's like they were good with that. But he's like, man, if I do this, like, first they want him to go to part-time memorization after school, and then eventually go to full-time. So in his heart, like, he really didn't want to do this because he was going to give up like this free time that he had. And so later on in his life, he said that he did istikhara. He asked Allah to help him, like, make whatever's best for him, make it easy for him, because it's not something obligatory that he has to do, right? But it's something that is better if he does it. And he was reflecting later on in his life. He did part-time memorization, then he did full-time memorization. And he said, like, 10 years later, 12 years later, like a lot of his friends, they got really good at basketball and they played basketball and they did all these things. But like 10 years, 20 years, 30 years later, when you look back at your life and you say, man, I played all this basketball, but later on, you know, your knees are going to hurt. You're not going to be able to play basketball. All you did is you played basketball. But if instead of that playing basketball, he said, I read Quran, I memorized Quran, I learned the meaning of the Quran. I did this for so many years. And 20 years later, you're going to be so happy that you did that. You're going to be, yeah, you missed out on some basketball. You missed out on some video games. You missed out on some stuff. But 20 years later, it's going to be something that you're going to be so happy that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He facilitated that for him. So he was saying that after a little while, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He made me not interested in those things. Even though he still wanted to play from time to time, wanted to do those things, but something in his heart, after he followed this process, after he started doing this, like he was not interested in those things. They were just kiddish things. And you guys know that like adults, like they're not interested in like kiddish things usually. They grow out of these things usually. So he grew out of those things at a young age because he was like, you know what, this is all a waste of time. And he wouldn't like bash other people for doing it, but he was not interested in it anymore. And that'll happen to you sometimes. You make dua to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and this thing that you think is so perfect and so good, and then later on, it's not a good choice, and you're not interested in it. You're not like, it's not something that you find appealing. And so hopefully those things that are especially a waste of time, like Fortnite and Roblox and all those things, and my kids play them as well, like hopefully those things like you're not going to be infatuated with, you're not going to be obsessed with, you're not going to be like, oh my God, whatever, this and that, because eventually you should grow out of those things. But some people, they don't. There are adults that are obsessed with these things and it's their entire life. And it's fine if it's like now and again and here and there. But if it's your entire life or it's a huge part of your life, then that's something that you wish Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He takes it and puts it far away from you and makes you want to be far away from it as well. The last part of the dua, you say to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, وَقْدُرْ لِي الْخَيْرِ لِي الْخَيْرِ. Oh Allah, will and make those things happen for me that are only good. Only the things that are the best for me. حَيْثُ كَانَ, wherever they may be, ثُمَّ أَرْضِنِي بِهِ, and then make me happy with them. Make me pleased with them. Make me content. Because a lot of times, especially with like disbelievers or people who don't do istikhara, they live a life with regret. And they think, man, I could have done this one thing. I should have done this other thing. Oh man, I should have actually done this. And why can't I do this? And even adults, like I have a friend who does istikhara regularly, but every now and then he's making a decision and sometimes he forgets. And I remember he came up to me and he said, you know, like he was opening up like another clinic or something. He was doing something. And he's like, you know what? It just didn't occur to me. I like totally forgot. And I didn't like follow this process the way that I should have. So it's sometimes like it's something that if you kind of step away from it, just like Quran, you memorize Quran, when you don't review it, you kind of forget it. And it's something that you have to constantly review and it has to make it be a part of your habits. And so when you kind of let go of this a little bit, it goes away from you. So you want it to be a part of your everyday life or your regular life, just like the companion, he said that the Prophet used to teach us this, just like he used to teach us an ayah from the Quran. So there's a lot more that we can say about this, but I'll just talk about the last thing, which is sometimes people have a misconception that after you do istikhara, like what are you supposed to do? Are you supposed to see a sign? Is there supposed to be a dream? Is something supposed to happen in your life? And the scholars, they mentioned that that's not the way that istikhara works. And the Prophet he never talked about like a specific dream or he talked about something happening or anything like that. But a few things can happen. One is that like the misconceptions, let's get them out of the way, that there's nothing authentically that's narrated or anything like that that some type of dream or some type of like manifestation or something event will happen in your life that's telling you that, oh yeah, you should do this thing or you should do that thing. You could see something in a dream, but it could be the thing that you're more interested in or the thing that you're thinking about a lot. So it doesn't necessarily mean that that's like an answer to your istikhara or anything like that. So take that with like a grain of salt and take it as like any other dream you would, which can be a sign. It could be good. It could be good news. Could be neutral. Could be nothing, right? It could be any of those things. So you're not going to necessarily see a specific like dream or anything like that. It's going to tell you that, oh yeah, this is a decision you should make. There's nothing that you can do to force that type of sign. Sometimes people, they do kind of strange things and they put like the word yes or no under their pillow. And then when they say, when I wake up, like whichever one I pull, that's the one I'm going to do. Like these are not things that are correct. So the scholars, they mentioned that a few things can happen after you do istikhara. Sometimes Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He limits your choices. Sometimes you're thinking, oh, should I accept this job offer? But then the company says, oh, you know what? We're not offering this to you anymore. And you think, oh my God, what happened? But actually you say, alhamdulillah, because you did istikhara. And now that choice that you had to make is not even a choice anymore. Because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He took it away from you. And maybe you thought it's going to be like this, but Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He knew that, yeah, maybe the company seems like it's good, but the manager you're going to have, or the situation you're going to be in, you're going to miss Jummah prayer, or you're going to have like very bad work-life balance, or 2 months from now, you're going to be leaving that job, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He's giving you another job that you're going to be in that job for maybe 10 years or something like that. So your options can get limited. That's number one. Number two is that you might be more content, or you might find new information that makes one decision better over the other. So if you're really like, man, like 60-40 split, and you're like, oh, should I do this? Should I do that? I'm not really sure. I think I want to do this. And then you do istikhara, and sometimes you get more information about something, and you say, oh, like I'm 90% sure now this is the right thing to do. And so you kind of move forward with that. Number three, maybe nothing happens. You can do istikhara again if you want as well, but you can also, like, life is about timing, and you have to make decisions. And they say that the theft of success is not failure, it's indecision. So when you don't actually make a choice, and life is not going to wait for you, right? You have to make a decision at some point. You have to do something. So you move forward with what you think is best, and you're confident that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He put tawfiq in that. He put that which is best for you. One of the other misconceptions is people think you do istikhara and then everything's going to work out for you. When you do istikhara, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He puts blessings in that, but it's not going to always meet your expectations. For example, a person can do istikhara, they can get married, and yes, they can still get divorced. Like, that's totally acceptable. A person can do istikhara, they can start a business. It doesn't mean that business is going to be a huge success. That business can still fail. But Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is facilitating that which is best for you. And you don't know what decisions are best for you. And so you're confident that whatever path you're taking, it's resulting in a higher quality of life for your deen, your dunya, and your akhirah, even if it's not what you're expecting. Because it's not about what you think, it's about what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, what He decides. And usually when something like that happens, people usually, like, months later or years later, they think back and they say, oh, this was the best thing that ever happened to me because of these other reasons. And you would not have been able to do these things had you not gone through that difficulty, for example. So even if nothing happens, you can still pursue with the decision that you think is best in that situation. There's a lot of other kind of smaller points, but I'll kind of leave them for Q&A. And it's kind of a mixed audience between like younger kids and older adults and stuff. So it's hard to kind of speak to both audiences at the same time. So I will take any questions that anybody has, inshallah. And if there are, we can try to address them. And if I can't answer them, then I'll let you know as well, inshallah. Are there any questions about this topic and making decisions and istikhara, being analytical, following a process? The interpretation of what? So as I mentioned, like, what is the result of the istikhara? There is no specific dream. There is no specific sign for istikhara. It can be like one of a few things. One is that maybe your options become more limited, and you can take that as a sign of that, okay, I should pursue this option because all the other choices are gone. Sometimes that happens. Like, you're deciding between A and B, and then B is not a choice anymore. So A is your only choice, and you move forward. Number two is that you get more information, and you're more content with one over the other. So if you feel more content about one over the other, and new information comes, and you say, oh, this is actually a really bad choice, and this is a good choice, then you can go forward with that. Number three is that nothing can happen, and you're confident that whatever choice you're making, that's the one that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is going to bless more than had you not done istikhara. So maybe nothing can happen, and you move forward with whatever you think is best in that situation. So Allah knows best. But those are some of the things that can happen. And sometimes you're very, very sure about something, but also you can do istikhara so that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He blesses that decision. I believe there was one of the wives of the Prophet ﷺ who did istikhara, not because of thinking, oh, the Prophet ﷺ, is he going to be a good husband or not? Of course, he's the best of mankind. But am I going to be good for him? Is this the right place for me? Is this the right thing for me to do? And so you should always do istikhara as a part of these big decisions that you're making, even if you're so sure it's the right thing, because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He puts enormous barakah and blessings in that. Allah knows best.
I have a couple of questions regarding istikhara. So first, how can the person differentiate between the result of the istikhara and the internal desire of the person?
Yeah.
Because a lot of people, they are confused regarding this. The moment that they drop the istikhara, because they wanted this issue, so they said, oh, this is a sign, so khalas, istikhara is telling me to proceed, to go for it.
Yeah, that's a good question. So one of the scholars was asked this question, and he said a couple things. So I'll kind of reiterate what he mentioned. One is that he mentioned specifically that sometimes you're so attached to something, and you're saying, you're doing istikhara just to kind of get it out of the way because you actually want to pursue this thing that you're desired towards, that you're seeking. And sometimes even you're thinking about it so much, you have a dream about it after you did istikhara, and you think, okay, now everything's lining up. But this is where that first thing that I mentioned in the beginning, that quality of at-ta'anni, al-anatu, al-hilm is really, really important, because you don't want to be impetuous. You don't want to be so like jumping on the first thing that happens, but you still need to remain analytical. You still need to remain calm. You still need to be procedural about what you're doing. So that's the first thing that he mentioned, is that just because you're desiring something, and even if you see some signs that you think like, oh, they're pointing to that, like follow the same process. Relax, take your time, map things out, make sure it makes sense. Number two, he mentioned that the scholars, they talk about the sequence of istishara and istikhara, and they say sometimes that you flip that sequence. There's no set sequence, but how I mentioned before, for ease, I mentioned you do your own research, you ask people for advice, and then you do the prayer of istikhara and the dua. The scholar, he mentioned that if you're so like enamored with something, you're obsessed with it, then it's a good idea to do istishara again, and maybe with different people, so that you can get a better understanding of making sure that this is the right decision. And even that can be somebody who's, even if they're not a Muslim, as long as they have knowledge about this topic, like if it's a car, you're so obsessed with it, and you're like, oh, I'm going to buy it. And then everybody's saying, okay, like this is not maybe a good decision, but you're like, oh, I did istikhara. But then you go and you talk to people who have knowledge, like a mechanic or somebody who's in the same life situation as you, and they say, yeah, I did that, I bought that car and it turned out to be terrible for this reason. Now everybody's telling you that, hey, you should not really buy this car. So part of the istikhara process is listening to that istishara as well. And so that's inshallah where many times your desires will get in check, because if you're so isolated and you have tunnel vision, then it's easy for you to convince yourself about anything. But if you talk to other people who have information and topic and knowledge and they want good for you, then inshallah, hopefully that helps you like curb your enthusiasm a little bit, curb your desire towards that. One scholar, he mentioned that it's very helpful for him when he's like obsessed with something that you become objective about it. So he has this method, he calls it the rifq method, which is you plan out the decision that you're trying to make, you compare it with other things, and you make a chart. He calls it the rifq method because the ra stands for raghba. So you put on a scale of 1 through 10, how badly do you want to do this? What's your desire towards it? And then the fa is for fursa, how much opportunity you have to do it. And the qaf is for qudra, how much ability you have to do it. And I've tried this myself many times, like when I feel like, okay, this is a better decision, but I really want to do this other thing. And when I map things out and I think to myself, okay, how badly do I want it? But how good of an opportunity is it? And also, how much ability do I have to do it? It helps me understand, okay, you know what? Yeah, you want this really badly, but you don't even have a good opportunity, and you really don't have the ability to even do this. So then I say, okay, you know what? This was actually not the right choice, and you become more objective. So there's just some of the things that the scholars mentioned.
The follow-up question to what you said, how a person deal with the uncertainty, especially if there is no signs happens at all.
So I think what I mentioned earlier, I think will suffice for this as well, because in the times that we live in, especially amongst younger people, they're very indecisive and they have OCD about certain things. And so many times I hear of like younger guys that are saying they're making wudu like so many times because they're so like OCD about it, or they're obsessed with it, or they're anxious. They always have anxiety about something, even after they maybe gone through this process. So definitely there's the meaning of istikhara. Knowing the meaning of that dua is really, really important, because you are putting your matters with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And it's almost like so many times in all the acts of worship that we do, there's the outer component, but also there's that inner spiritual component. If somebody, for example, is praying, but their khushu is not there, their focus is not there, they will fulfill the obligation because they believe that prayer is important, it's obligatory, they owe it to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, they owe it to themselves, they have to do it. But based on their khushu, they'll get a portion of that reward. Whereas somebody who does the outward, if there's somebody who's like a disbeliever who's doing the outward, but they're saying this is not a thing I have to do at all, it's not something that I don't believe in this entity that I'm doing it or anything like that, then that prayer is not happening. So there's like a spiritual component to this as well. And that inshallah helps like give it a little bit of tarbiyah, help train it a little bit. But you might not see a sign and you have to make a decision. Life does not wait for any one person. People always say, oh, you know, I was at the right place at the right time. How are you ever going to be at the right place at the right time if you're not always putting yourself out there, if you're not always like moving forward? But you have to advance a little bit. You have to take a step. You have to say something. You cannot spend 10 years making a decision that maybe you should have taken 10 days or 2 weeks or a month. And so, again, I think seeking advice from other people will help push you in a certain direction and give you the right nudge. But the scholars mention that you should be content that you followed the process, you did the right steps. It doesn't mean it's going to end up the way that you want it to end up, but you can be confident that had you not done this, then the quality of life and the blessings of that decision would be severely diminished. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala knows best. Usually when I get this question, I get it from somebody who is already engaged in a certain sin. And they want to do istikhara to help one part of that sin that they're doing. So for example, if they have like a relationship with somebody that they're not supposed to have, and they say, I want to do istikhara because now I want to marry this person. So the scholars mentioned that, okay, first of all, if you're engaged in a sin, number one, take yourself out of that situation. Istikhara is not like some type of magic, like 8-ball or something like that you do istikhara and then all of a sudden, like things are going to work out or things are going to be whatever's happening. Number one, take yourself out of the sin. Make sure you're doing the obligatory things. Somebody who prays 5 times a day, is obedient to their parents, and maybe they're not doing istikhara, versus somebody who's not doing any of those things and then praying istikhara, that's a night and day difference. And so take yourself out of the sin and start focusing on the obligatory things, and then these things become easier. It becomes easier to be content with whatever you're doing. Usually if somebody's like in some type of sin and then they're like, oh, I'm doing this, but I don't know, nothing's happening. Well, it's like, yeah, take yourself out of the sin. Make sure you're doing the obligatory things. And so that usually rectifies that situation from what I've seen. Allah knows best.
So that's very important for the youth, because a lot of youth, they have these type of questions and they need to, we need more elaboration regarding this. Last question, it's a technical question. So this is also from the youth. Can the istikhara delay that matter rather than confirming it?
Yeah, that's a beautiful question. And that tells me that somebody's really thinking about this. There was a scholar who he passed away a few years ago. His name is Sheikh Muhammad al-Sharif, rahimahullah. And when he was talking about dua, he wasn't specifically talking about istikhara, although he did talk about istikhara as well. But when he was talking about dua, he used to say that sometimes you make dua for something, and when the thing you wanted, it becomes far away from you, he actually gets even more happy and more excited, because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala chose something that's better for him. So if somebody's like, oh, I really want to get into like this medical school or this law school, or I want to get into this one thing or this one program, and then you do istikhara, you have the opportunity to do it, you have a decision to make, and then you get denied from that. Or it becomes something, oh, you can't do it this year, maybe you can do it next year. And sometimes we get like deflated from that. We feel defeated. Whereas the Sheikh, he mentioned, he gets more excited because you asked Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to help you. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala chose something that's even better for you, even though you cannot see it, even though you can't understand it. And again, I work a lot with youth, and many times I've seen people that are like obsessed with a certain college they want to go to. Everybody in their family went to it. They want to go to it, and then they don't get into it. And they're like crying, and they're thinking, oh, what did I do wrong? What happened? And we're telling them that, dude, this is the best thing for you. And you visit them 10 years later, and the things that happened in those 4 years or whatever, the friends they made and the decisions they made, they say, oh, it was the best thing for me. But when you're looking at something that a human being who can't even see like a minute ahead of them, you really don't know what's best for you, even though you might think one thing. So you can be excited and happy that if it got delayed, that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is choosing a better timing for you or a better thing for you, and Allah knows best. So if there's nothing else, then inshallah we'll go ahead and end here. I appreciate you guys staying. I know it went a little bit longer, and I got a little bit maybe too much in the weeds and maybe not enough detail on certain things because we have a big audience. And I hope that inshallah maybe next time we can, I think the next topic that I'm going to do is going to be a detailed description of Jannah. So inshallah it's something that will be applicable to everybody. We'll end over here inshallah. Subhanakallahumma wa bihamdika ashhadu an la ilaha illa anta astaghfiruka wa atubu ilayk wa akhiru da'wana an alhamdulillahi rabbil alamin. Jazakumullah khairan. I did want to actually just make the announcement as well that there's a program that I am taking as a student. It's called the Murabbi Development Program. And I have a poster over here. It's a 3-year Islamic studies program for adults. If anybody wants to learn about it, come by and stop by. Or you can visit ikna.education, icna.education to learn more about this program. So I just wanted to mention that as well. Jazakumullah khairan. Thank you. Oh, yeah. Thank you so much.
Assalamu alaikum. Sheikh, Jazakallah khair for giving the time and mashallah giving us a detail about istikhara. And again for tomorrow, I just want to remind everyone we have a program after Maghrib. It will be a beautiful night. So it's a lot of khuras are coming tomorrow. So make sure you come with your family, kids, let them enjoy and learn about the relationship with Quran. And mashallah, then there will be a talk by Sheikh too on Isra al-Miraj. And dinner will be served. So it's a good opportunity. Tell your wife not to cook. Come to the masjid, enjoy the program, and enjoy the good meal, inshallah. Jazakallah khair.
Hmm.